Being a little sister is one of the best gigs ever. I mean, ever. This is especially true when you are an oops baby and the youngest child by 9 years, like me. Growing up with 3 bonus parents on the Iron Range of Minnesota was nothing short of awesome for a few reasons. For one, nobody picked on me, not once. 2, they all had special things to teach me, and they were all different from one another. This meant I never got bored, and they never got completely annoyed because they just passed me off on the next person. 3, they gave stuff to me that they didn't want anymore. Whenever this happened, I felt like I landed the motherlode of treasures, and they got to unload a bunch of junk out of their closets and drawers. It was a win-win situation. 4, I had 5 adults looking out for me and loving me. What kid doesn't want that? What person doesn't want that? Deep down, that's what we all want, all the time, every minute of every day. Now, while I could write a whole book about each of my 3 siblings, I want to introduce you to my big brother Cedric, who inspired me when I was little and continues to do so today, more than 30 years after his death. The older I get, the more inspiration I feel. I think it's because age helps me connect more deeply with his wisdom. There isn't just one thing that he did that was inspirational, because his whole quiet life influenced and inspired me. The problem was that he didn't see the inspiration in himself that all of us could. Ceds, or Sedge as we sometimes called him, was 13 years older than me and the big brother of the family. Cedric was, different than most people. He was incredibly smart, the kind of genius who would have been right at home with Steve Jobs' team at Apple. He knew a ton about pretty much everything. He had the kind of brain that sucked up knowledge like a Dyson. He also spent a lot of time thinking about what everything meant. He loved discussing his ideas with anyone, anywhere, although there were many people that didn't understand him because he marched to the beat of a different drum. Cedric was the kind of guy that had creativity oozing out of his pores. He could draw everything: realistic animals, people, outdoor scenes, abstract shapes, and cartoony characters. He was also a classic music aficionado. He wrote incredible letters and could pluck stories right out of the air. He made perfect geometric shapes out of straws and fishing line, and he hung them in his room like a mathematical Milky Way. I wish I had pictures of them to show you just how magnificent they were. Geometry was his jam. I have a feeling it was evidence of God to him. Being a math and computer science double major kind of guy, he went on to work for IBM and NCR. Now, PCs didn't trip his creative artistic trigger the way a Mac did. If a PC was a piece of cheap waxy chocolate, a Mac was a square of Ghirardelli with caramel oozing out of the center. He loved Macs so much, he sold his car to buy one of the first Mac classics. It even had a double disk drive. Now, our dad thought he was nuts, but Cedric was completely delighted. He inhaled books like he did oxygen, and he did everything he could to make sure I did too. He introduced me to books like The Hobbit and The Chronicles of Narnia as soon as I could sit still long enough to listen to a story without looking at pictures. He read these books to me with such animation, I believed I was actually right there with Bilbo and Lucy. He told me once that he thought of me as Lucy come to life. Every time he came home, he had at least one new book for me. The Little House on the Prairie box set, a Star Wars novelization, or the newest Garfield book. To this day, I love losing myself in the world of a book. Now, I don't read as much as I should, but when I get the chance to play hooky for my life for a while, I always think of him. Sometimes Cedric amused both of us by challenging me to a picture war in which one of us would start by drawing something harmless, like a feather, and then the other person would draw something to interrupt the first person's thing, like maybe Old Man Winter's breath. We'd go back and forth until somebody ended it with an atomic bomb. He didn't just let me win, either. He pushed me to think creatively the way that another father might push his kid to be a good hockey player or football player. I still chase that creative rush, especially when I'm feeling sad. It's honestly the best medicine I can think of. Cedric also passed on his love of music, and he was careful to choose things he knew I'd love. He bought me every Star Wars movie soundtrack, a few collections of flute sonatas, and lots of 80s pop music that he personally loved. We would sit around his stereo for hours, marveling at John Williams and Mozart and Billy Joel. We felt like we were the luckiest people in the world to be listening to it together at that exact moment. We could see it in the flash in each other's eyes. One time, when we were at a cousin's wedding, we slipped away from the crowd so he could pull out his yellow Sony Walkman for me to listen to the latest Olympic theme song. I put his earphones in and pressed play, and as that music swelled, I looked at Cedric through overflowing eyes. He sat there, nodding his head and smiling with his wide expanse of perfect teeth. He knew exactly what part of Olympic fanfare and theme I was listening to and how the music was making me feel, because he was feeling it too. And at that moment, we were perfectly connected. If there was one thing that defined Cedric, it was his love for the outdoors. He would explore the world, and he loved it as much as I did. Well, actually, probably more. And he didn't mind if his little sister tagged along with him at least once in a while, when he wasn't escaping to the woods to heal his soul after some stressful incident had pushed him right up to the edge. Because I adored him, I spent every moment I could with him. And when we were outside, the two of us were our truest selves. He took me on grand adventures, both in the woods and in his canoe on Lake Vermilion. Whether it was a single leaf on a tree or the rhythm of the waves on the side of the canoe, Cedric helped me see art in absolutely everything. One of our favorite activities was walking through our 40 acres of land in northern Minnesota. To us, it was sacred land and sacred time. Rock hopping, we called it, or swamp slogging. He called himself Cedric Swampslogger, like Luke Skywalker, and he named me the Princess Carleia. I loved it. Cedric went first, choosing the steadiest paths and holding back branches so I wouldn't lose an eye. He talked excitedly about whatever he thought I should know about at any given moment. If he wasn't filling me with knowledge about glaciers that scrape the rocks around us or spouting the names of every type of tree in the woods, he was educating me about complicated life lessons by using metaphors that I could easily understand. But as wise as Cedric was on the outside, I know that on the inside, he felt like things were just out of control. He had a hard time relating emotionally to people, especially people he thought were trying to control him, like a boss, or our crabby, sick with lupus and under the influence of prednisone dad. He also didn't fit in with the popular people that seemed to have all the power and influence. This is not only because we were poor country people, but also because they thought he was pretty nerdy, the way he loved math and science and art more than sports and trucks. Most of the other regular guys just couldn't relate to him. And he wasn't a person who strived to have a big house, a fancy car, or hip clothes. No, my big brother loved ideas and beauty. And he was happiest when he was creating. He was content to be alone most of the time, and he loved to just sit and absorb the universe. There's a saying that says the line between genius and madness is a fine one, and Cedric definitely walked it. My big brother was plagued by what Winston Churchill once called the big black dog, depression. And because it was the 80s, he didn't get the right treatment for it. Being on antidepressants or going to see a therapist were signs of weakness back then, so most people avoided it. On the Iron Range especially, he would have been seen as a wimp. He already wasn't a truck-driving, gun-wielding kind of guy, so he suffered with it for years. until that big, black, terrible dog took him away from us on a quiet, cold night sometime in January of 1987. We're not exactly sure what happened, but we do know the world lost an incredible soul to the frigid waters of the Mississippi River. His death was ruled a suicide, and we found out about it for sure on April Fool's Day. It took a long time for me to get over losing him. In fact, I don't know if I'll ever completely get over it, to be honest. It changed who I was to the very core of my being, and you just don't pick up where you left off. At the same time, though, I do get the feeling that he's not that far away. I think about him every day when I go to work. He told me to never be a teacher because the workload is too big and the kids were brats and the pay was too low, but I became one anyway. He modeled it for me every day of his life, and I wanted to be just like him. I've tried to be the person who notices the kid who doesn't exactly fit in. I don't always succeed, but I hope I've helped some kids like him who have sat in my classroom over the years. Well, lately, now that I'm getting old, I've been remembering some of the lessons he taught me on our nature walks. One of my favorite metaphors that I've carried with me through all sorts of life adventures, both thrilling and devastating, was inspired by one of our favorite summer pastimes at our cabin. Basically, life is water skiing. In fact, there are just a few rules to keep in mind. So here they are, the rules of life as illustrated by water skiing. Number 1, don't panic. Number 2, if you fall, fall gracefully. Number 3, when you fall, and you will, let go of the rope. And number 4, always, always, always get up and try again. Those are simple words. They're obvious and subtle, optimistic and encouraging. You could look at them as a series of challenges. Now, I've had them posted on my classroom wall for more than 20 years, but other than an occasional brief mention before some panic-inducing test, I haven't really thought about the depth of Cedric's metaphor until January of 2018. I was lying in bed one morning and I was asking myself, why do I hurt all over? Why have I had more migraines this month than I have in years? Why do I feel unrested after 8 hours of sleep? Why is my old annoying acquaintance, anxiety, insisting that it deserves prime real estate in my brain? What exactly is my body trying to tell me? Then it dawned on me. I'm water skiing through my life, but the boat is still going at full throttle, and I've got a face full of water because it's dragging me all over the bay. I haven't let go of the rope like I know I should. I could almost hear Cedric's voice saying, Carlene, the boat is never in control. The skier is. Right. Cedric's wisdom became the central organizing idea for Lisa's and my book, Extraordinary. If you look closely at the pages, you'll see his influence in the artwork as well. I mean, really, he's everywhere in it because every time we speak about compassion and acceptance and love, we're sharing the wisdom of my big brother. Every time we urge you to be creative and notice the beauty in the world, we're sharing the wisdom of my big brother. And every time we remind you that you can most definitely get up and try again after a wipeout, no matter how bad it is, we're sharing the wisdom of my big brother. Even though he was human and ultimately struggled to remember this, the fourth rule of life according to water skiing, I think he would want you to remember it in your life. Without Cedric, we wouldn't have a book. And we're so honored to bring his wisdom back to life after all these years and share with all of you.